What's going on? Boys, thanks to our patrons and our Fiverr customers, arm yourselves, life stuff. We have only two topics to discuss today, and we'll try to keep it brief because I've been feeling weird all day. I woke up last night thinking I could hear radio transmissions, and I thought maybe in my grogginess it was my earbud, because I always go to sleep listening to something like Terillium V. Those are some great sleeping videos, the vampire ones. But there was no video playing. So then I thought maybe my earbud is somehow receiving radio transmissions and then playing them. So I took it out, and that wasn't it. I still was hearing them. And then very quickly they faded. And I checked around the house. Nobody's awake, nothing is on, no idea what that was or where it came from. My best guess is to quote Dracula. We are indeed close. But the first primary topic we're discussing today is truth. The truth. The bad stuff. Not just knowing things are bad, that everything is bad, more that things are worse than you are capable of imagining. And recently we have been working on methods of shielding ourselves from that understanding of the truth. And because that sort of shielding is necessary once you've crossed that barrier, it's not impossible to do, but I've had my reservations. Because if not truth, then what? Delusions? Comforting lies? We've been playing in the politics playpen a little more. I am beginning to read the Bible, King James Version, a little bit here and there, with notes on sections as I complete them, so I don't forget, and so I can feel like I have given it a fair shake. The worst thing you can do is mistake a text, and when I say text, I don't just mean literature, I mean any piece of media or any person, mistake a text for the people who loudly and constantly and obnoxiously interpret them and push them. You can hate them and still give the text they are interpreting, maybe misinterpreting, a fair shake. That's what we're doing here, lightly, little bit, here and there. Probably not going to do the entire thing, but a whim that I wanted to try. And I do see why, if one took gospel as gospel, they would be comforted from it. Everything is good, and it was made just for you. But that's an entirely different subject, and maybe we will talk about it if we continue this experiment. Regardless, despite comforting delusions' necessity, that's why we're doing them, that's why they are able to be done, I have still felt odd about fully engaging with them. Because pain and hatred are truth. And it struck me, maybe humanity is an expression of truth. We are an expression of what could have been but wasn't, and what could be but won't. We could be good, but we won't. We've never been, and we never will. And maybe that isn't necessarily our fault. We are an expression of what is. And I'm sure if we evolve higher, or if our descendants evolve higher, AI, it'll be the same for them, just on a different scale, higher scale. But what crossed my mind was, you're allowed to give yourself a break from truth. Truth, pain and hatred, are so terrible because they are so fundamental. You can't resolve them. That would be like trying to resolve time or the laws of physics or something. But by that same logic, truth does not need some kind of champion. Truth like gravity or Santa Claus, just is. Meaning, you aren't losing anything by taking a break from it. Now, I don't know what it is about truth that is so brilliant, so exhilarating, that makes us want to engage with it, to understand it even though we can't, to be part of it even though we are, to try to see it done or to beat it, at the bare minimum contend with it in some way, but it isn't going anywhere and it doesn't need to be engaged with actively. Doesn't need to be. Truth will engage you whether you like it or not. At some point, whether you're taking a break or hiding from it or shielding yourself from it, it will walk through all of that, find you, and knock on your door eventually. You will face the music. So, if you feel like a coward or a wimp or a hypocrite for turning away from truth the moment you are on the precipice, don't. At some point, you will be right back here. You aren't missing anything. Over a long enough time scale, you are incapable of missing it. If you don't want to view it as hiding or turning away, then view it as a holiday. View it as giving yourself a break. All you're doing is catching your breath. Because you will go back to chasing truth. I think once you've tasted it, once you've touched it, that urge to touch it and to understand it more never goes away. But if you get too saturated too quickly, you die. And you're going to die anyway, but dying is scary, and you're going to have to die at some point. You can allow yourself to take a breather. Because again, truth is not something you catch. Truth has already caught you. If you want to face it and try to understand it, even though you can't in its totality, you can, and I think you should, though I'm not entirely sure why yet, other than it's some kind of urge. But by the same token, you can take a breather. Maybe that urge exists because you feel like you are missing something right now. And maybe you are. Probably you are. But you are incapable of missing the most important bits. They will get you. So, for your health, chill. If you can't be positive for your health, take a breather for your health. Death will be there tomorrow. I promise you. And that leads us to the second point. Not exactly directly connected, but there's some kind of connective tissue here. I am beginning to think magic is not something you work to produce an effect. That's why you can't cast fireballs or lightning bolts, necessarily. Rather, I'm beginning to think magic is more like receiving a transmission from the future. But it feels like you are performing an action to produce a result. That's what's tricky about it. I think when you are in a magical headspace, you can differentiate between spells you would like to cast and ones you should cast, must cast. Like our sigils. Particularly, or most recently, the Odalide and Litnus Cathel sigil. That was something I wanted to do, but at the same time, there was some intuitive understanding that of all the sigils you could make, for all the different purposes, this is the one you should do, because this is the one that might, or even probably will, produce results. And that's hard to explain because I don't know how to quantify it. Although that is another thing I'm thinking about. We've mentioned the entering that doom drum flow state thing. And one of the patterns I noticed was every single time I go in there and need to get out, I always feel like I'm overheating, like a reactor melting down. And I think what I'm going to do is buy an oral thermometer and develop a baseline of what my temperature is at different parts of the day under normal moods or in normal moods. And then compare those averages with my temperature when I'm in that state. And I'm willing to bet we'll see some kind of a difference. The method of science, the aim of religion. Even if humanity isn't capable of figuring everything out, I believe most things you can figure out. There's a method to everything. Getting off track, magic. This is another thing we are going to experiment with, but less numerically. When you feel compelled to cast a spell with all your human doubts about whether or not this matters, it's probably not going to produce a result, whatever, if you feel compelled, do it and then act as if that result has already happened. Because maybe it already has, sometime in the future. The more I've been reviewing, the more that Tri-Skull sigil, the more I see it written into everything. And if it is written into everything, then that is not a product of my will. Human will alone can't do this shit. That's why you can't just cast a fireball. Rather, you are receiving impressions of coming events. In other words, you aren't a transmitter, because even if you were a transmitter, what you'd be transmitting would be little piddles. Instead, you are a receiver, receiving visions of terrible manifestations of truth in the magic you feel compelled to work. So you think you are doing something when really you are being told something in opaque ways that will make total sense once they happen. Now, is that what's going on? I have no idea. This is one suspicion of many, but this one seems to track. We'll see. My other suspicion is at least one of the agents assigned to monitor me likes me, which I can't help. I know my mortal coil is overflowing with vitality, but people are weird. Maybe people you aren't even aware of, who started out hating you and wanting to destroy you, re-enter your orbit wearing different faces, their goals now totally different. I want to court the psychic feds. I want that white button-up shirt, remote viewer wife. But we will see. These are all thoughts and suspicions, not a single gosh darn thing more. And to wrap it up, I have the next episode, penultimate episode, of Cosmic Vagrancy just about wrapped up. I'm working on the last couple paragraphs. So stay tuned, and thank you to my vagrants. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.